shadows dance, and the veils of reality fade to reveal a forgotten map, a labyrinth of distorted mirrors that promises, to those who dare to look, not salvation, but a deeper understanding of the very essence of existence. Ever wondered what lies beyond the gates of ordinary perception, in the shadowy recesses where magic and the human psyche intertwine in ways that defy logic and sanity? Imagine an arcane, a diagram that, according to one of the most infamous and revered occultists of all time, Crowley, is not merely a symbolic representation, but a portal. This is not a map to earthly treasures or a promised paradise, but to the abyss, to the counterpart of the Tree of Life, a distorted and dangerous mirror known as the Qliphoth. Crowley, the magician, the better man, as he liked to call himself, dedicated his life to unraveling the mysteries of the universe, to penetrating the best-kept secrets of creation and destruction, of light and darkness. And in his relentless pursuit of knowledge, he left us a complex and often misunderstood legacy, the Qliphoth, as a map. But what exactly is this Tree of Death? How does it differ from its better-known counterpart, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life? And why did Crowley consider it so crucial to his great work? The Qliphoth, in its essence, represents the husks, the impurities, the chaotic and primordially destructive forces that emanate from divine energy, but, instead of being harmonized and manifested in constructive forms, remain in a raw and dangerous state. It is the hidden face of cosmic divorce, the dark echo that resonates from primordial creation. Crowley saw it not as a mere collection of demons in the popular sense, but as a map of psychological and cosmological forces, a path of radical self-transformation that required confronting the darkest and most repressed aspects of the human psyche and universal manifestation. For him, the journey through the Qliphoth was not an invitation to depravity, but an imperative necessity for obtaining true gnosis, absolute knowledge. It was a process of deconstruction and reconstruction of the self, where each step into the abyss was a step closer to wholeness, to union with the divine, paradoxically, through immersion in what is considered antagonistic. The exploration of the Qliphoth, guided by Crowley's lens, is an expedition to the heart of Western occultism, a delve into practices that shaped secret orders, inspired alchemical rituals, and unveiled the secrets of demonology, not as external forces to be feared, but as internal and universal aspects to be understood and integrated. We are about to unfold a map that few have the courage to follow, a path that will lead us through arcane symbolism, rituals that defy reason, and concepts that resonate with the deepest human anxieties and aspirations. This is not a study for the faint of heart, but for those who seek the truth, no matter how disturbing it may be. Prepare to question everything you think you know about good and evil, light and darkness, and the very fabric of reality as we unravel the Qliphoth, the map of the Tree of Death, according to the revelations of Crowley. Crowley, a figure shrouded in controversy and genius, conceived of the Qliphoth not as a mere catalogue of infernal entities, but as a dark and essential reflection of creation itself. In his vision, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, with its illuminated paths and harmonious Sephiroth, represented the macrocosm and microcosm in their ideal form, the plane of divine manifestation and human consciousness in balance. However, Crowley realized that this representation, beautiful as it was incomplete. Existence for him was not limited to light, darkness, primordial chaos. The very entropy of the universe were equally vital components of the totality of experience. The Qliphoth, therefore, emerged as the inevitable counterpart of the Tree of Life, the dark side of the cosmic force, the mirror that reflected the shadow of each Sephirah and each path of the traditional tree. He interpreted it as the set of shells, Qliphoth, in the Hebrew plural, formed in the process of divine emanation, energies that, if not properly contained and transmuted, manifest as chaotic, destructive, and in many ways, dangerous forces. For Crowley, the study and traversal of the Qliphoth were not an invitation to villainy or the invocation of malevolent forces in a simplistic sense, but rather a necessary dive into the depths of the psyche and reality to reach a higher level of self-awareness and union with the divine. He saw it as a map of the depths of the soul, of repressed aspects, ancestral fears, and primordial desires that, when confronted and understood, could be integrated, leading to enlightenment. In his writings, particularly in works such as Liber 797 and his commentaries on the Kabbalah, Crowley details the parallels between the 10 Qliphoth, usually associated with 10 primordial shells or demons, and the 10 Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. Each Qlipha represents a distortion or shadowy aspect of its corresponding Sephira, but also a path of hidden power and knowledge. He not only described these correspondences, but also used them as a framework for his rituals and magical practices. He believed that by working with the energies represented by the Qliphoth, the adept could dismantle the illusions of the ego, confront their own inner demons, and thus ascend to a higher state of consciousness, achieving the true will. Ascension through the Qliphoth, for Crowley, was a form of controlled self-annihilation, a process of shattering the illusory structures of the personality to reveal the authentic self, the sacred self and protector he identified as the true destiny of every seeker. He saw the Qliphothic forces not as purely evil, but as raw cosmic energies that, if misunderstood or manipulated without due knowledge and respect, could lead to madness and destruction. However, with the right discipline, knowledge, and guidance, these same energies could be tamed and utilized for the great work, the culmination of magical and spiritual transformation. His approach was radical and devoid of conventional moralism, emphasizing the importance of exploring all facets of existence, including the darkest, to achieve wholeness. He encouraged his followers not to fear the darkness, but to understand it, to dance with it, for it was in the confrontation with the abyss that true liberation and the power of the will were fully manifested. Delving into the heart of the Qliphothic arcana, guided by the inscrutable wisdom of Aleister Crowley, we encounter an intricate map of 11 shadowy spheres, a distorted and at times terrifying reflection of the Kabbalistic pantheon of the Tree of Life. Each Qlipha, as they are known, is not simply a receptacle of malevolence, but an archetype of primordial power, a portal to universal energies that, when misunderstood or unbalanced, can manifest as destructive forces, but which, under the aegis of knowledge and will, offer pathways to transcendence and radical self-transformation. Crowley, in his relentless quest for gnosis, divine understanding, saw the traversal of these spheres as an essential component of his great work. He did not preach demon worship, but rather the exploration and integration of the energies they represented, energies that manifest at all levels of existence, from the depths of the human psyche to cosmic laws. The first level, the sphere of Lilith, or Nehema, depending on the specific Qliphotic tradition, is often associated with Malkuth, the realm of physical manifestation, but in its shadowy form. It is the sphere of primordial seduction, temptation, uncontrollable lust, and feminine power in its wildest and most untamed form. The journey here involves confronting the most basic desires and primal attractions that bind us to matter, learning to master them, not suppress them. Crowley saw this energy as vital for sexual liberation and the manifestation of power on the physical plane, but warned against being consumed by it. Next we find Gamaliel, the impurity or darkness, who opposes Yesod, the ground, the sphere of imagination and the unconscious. Gamaliel is the realm of vices, hidden fears, deepest illusions, and psychic stagnation. It is where nightmares take shape and truths are distorted. For Crowley, exploring Gamaliel was a delve into the depths of the collective and individual unconscious, a confrontation with the shadows that shape our behaviors and perceptions, seeking to find the light in the deepest darkness, the truth behind the illusion. The spheres that follow, such as Thagirion, associated with Hod, glory, the sphere of intellect and communication, represent distorted reason, corrupted knowledge, and intellectual arrogance. Crowley emphasized that true wisdom resides not in the intellect alone, but in the integration of all faculties, including intuition and mystical experience. Working with Thagirion meant confronting one's own mind, its prejudices, and its limitations, seeking a broader and less dogmatic understanding of reality. The dance between light and shadow, between creation and its reverse, the Qliphoth, as mapped and interpreted by Aleister Crowley, reverberates in countless aspects of society, spirituality, and the human psyche itself. The influence of this dark cosmology, far from being restricted to esoteric circles, permeates culture in subtle ways, shaping our understanding of good and evil, the sacred and the profane. On a psychological level, the 11 spheres of the Qliphoth can be seen as a diagram of the depths of the human unconscious. Each Qlipha represents archetypes of power and shadow that we all carry within us. The primal lust of Lilith, the stagnation and fears of Gamaliel, the distorted reason of Thagirion, the cruelty of Gagshebla, the disintegration of Golab, the rigidity and enslavement of Tagaririm, the revolt of Harab Serapel, the destruction of Samael, the venom of the serpent, and the absence of everything in Thomiel. Crowley, with his mastery of occult psychology, understood that denial or suppression of these energies did not make them disappear, but rather made them more powerful and destructive in their unconscious manifestations. The Qliphotic journey, from his perspective, was a process of self-confrontation and integration, where the adept learned to recognize, accept, and ultimately transmute these inner forces. Rather than falling victim to their inner demons, the individual became their master, harnessing their energies for growth and the manifestation of their true will. In social and cultural terms, the light-shadow dichotomy that the Qliphoth represents is reflected in our moral and ethical frameworks. Narratives of heroes and villains, order and chaos, civilization and savagery all echo this fundamental duality. Crowley's exploration of the Qliphoth challenges the simplistic Manichaean view, suggesting that even the darkest forces have a purpose, a role in the cosmic tapestry. This leads us to reevaluate our judgments, to consider that what is considered evil may simply be imbalanced or misunderstood energy, and that true wisdom lies in understanding and harmonizing all forces, not in demonizing or eradicating the dark ones. In alchemy, Qliphothic energies find a parallel in the processes of nigredo, blackening, the initial phase of decomposition and dissolution necessary for transformation. The Qliphoth can be seen as a map for navigating the darkness inherent in this process, a guide for the alchemist seeking the philosopher's stone within. Just as in alchemy, where raw substance must be broken down to be refined, the human psyche and reality itself contain Qliphothic elements that must be confronted and transmuted to achieve a state of perfection or enlightenment. Crowley's influence and his interpretations of the Qliphoth also extend to secret societies and occult movements that seek to explore the limits of consciousness and power. His teachings on the great work and the need to confront the abyss inspired generations of seekers to venture down paths less traveled, challenging dogma and seeking deeper, albeit risky, knowledge. The Qliphoth, therefore, is not just an abstract concept, but a living reflection of the tensions and dynamics present in our own existence, an invitation to look within, to unravel the mysteries of our own nature and of the universe that surrounds us, accepting that the totality includes both light and shadow, both creation and its qliphothic counterpart. Despite the depth and breadth of the Qliphoth concept, it is often surrounded by myths and misunderstandings, many of which stem from a literal and moralistic interpretation of its contents. One of the most common misconceptions is to equate the Qliphoth directly with the Christian hell, or a den of demons to be feared and avoided at all costs. This simplistic view ignores the complex cosmology and psychological approach that figures like Aleister Crowley employed in studying and mapping these energies. For Crowley, the entities associated with the Qliphoth were not necessarily external beings with malevolent intentions, but rather symbolic representations of primordial forces, psychological archetypes, and aspects of existence itself that, when imbalanced or misunderstood, manifest as destructive. The demon Samael, for example, while traditionally associated with destruction and poison, can also be interpreted as the force of keen discernment, the ability to cut through illusions and separate the true from the false, a powerful energy when channeled correctly. Another myth is the idea that exploring the Qliphoth is inherently dangerous and will inevitably lead to madness or ruin. While the Qliphothic journey is indeed perilous and requires great self-awareness, discipline, and knowledge, Crowley saw it as a path of ascent, not of descent. The danger lies in ignorance and lack of preparation. With proper guidance and a clear understanding of the risks, the adept can navigate these depths and emerge transformed. The question of demonology in the Qliphoth is also a point of controversy. Many traditions view demons as entities opposed to God, to be combated. Crowley, however, tended toward a more panentheistic view, where divinity manifests in all things, including what we call the shadow. The Qliphothic forces, for him, were aspects of the divine that did not manifest harmoniously or constructively, but were nonetheless part of the totality of existence. Demonology, in this context, becomes a study of the chaotic and primordial energies that need to be understood and integrated to achieve enlightenment, rather than a literal battle against infernal creatures. The very idea of a map of the Qliphoth is also misunderstood. It is not a geographic map, but a symbolic and psychological one. The crossing is not literal, but a journey of internal self-transformation. The paths between the Qliphoth represent stages of psychic and spiritual development, and the demons associated with each sphere represent the challenges and lessons that must be faced at each stage. As we unravel the intricate map of the Qliphoth, as bequeathed by Aleister Crowley, we are confronted with the audacity of his vision, the understanding that the totality of existence resides not only in apparent light, but also in the shadowy depths that surround it, and paradoxically, give it form. We see that the Qliphoth is not a mere compendium of entities to be feared, but a diagram of primordial forces, a distorted mirror of the tree of life that invites us on a journey of self-confrontation and transmutation. Crowley taught us that the path to true gnosis, to union with the divine, is not limited to ascension through ethereal planes, but requires the courage to descend into the depths of the abyss, to confront our own inner demons and the chaotic energies that shape the universe. The exploration of these shadow spheres, far from being an invitation to depravity, is an act of alchemical courage, a process of dismantling the illusions of the ego and the rigid structures of personality to reveal the authentic being, the sacred and protective self. The lessons drawn from this arcane map resonate in our daily lives. The need to accept and integrate our own shadows, to understand that evil is often merely an imbalanced or misunderstood energy, and that true wisdom lies in harmonizing all facets of human experience. Qliphoth, therefore, serves as a powerful reminder that the spiritual journey is complete only when we embrace the totality of who we are: light and shadow, creation and apparent destruction. We are invited to look beyond the veils of conventional morality and seek truth in the most unexplored landscapes of our own consciousness and the cosmos. The great work, after all, is the union of opposites, and it is in the darkest spheres that we often find the keys to the deepest enlightenment. May Crowley's boldness inspire us to continue our own quest for knowledge, to not fear the shadows, but to illuminate them with the flame of understanding. The question that remains, then, is not whether you dare to look into the Qliphoth, but whether you dare to look within yourself, into the depths it reveals, and emerge transformed, delving into the intricate web of Qliphothic symbolism. Crowley's exploration takes us beyond mere archetypal representation, delving into practical methods and rituals that aim not only at self-knowledge, but also at the active manifestation and control of the energies residing in the abyss. The concept of Qliphothic initiation, a term that, while not explicitly coined by Crowley in its entirety, is inherent to his approach to the great work, suggests a gradual and deliberate process of confrontation and integration with the forces of the Qliphoth. This differs radically from mere academic observation or passing interest. It involves active engagement, often mediated by specific rituals that seek to mimic the cosmic and psychological correspondences of each Qliphoth. For example, to address Gamaliel's energies, the sphere of impurity and the deep unconscious, a Crowleyan adept might not engage in passive meditations, but rather in practices that destabilize ordinary perception and force confrontation with repressed material. This might involve the use of controlled psychoactive substances, as Crowley explored in his own research, induced vision techniques, or immersion in ritualistic scenarios that emulate the chaos and disorientation inherent in this sphere. The goal is not to plunge into self-destruction, but rather to emerge with a clearer understanding of psychic foundations, unraveling ancestral fears and ingrained behavioral patterns that impede progress. Alchemy, in its practical essence, is also a model for this approach. The process of nigredo, the decomposition of prima materia, mirrors the disintegration of false securities and superficial identities that the Qliphothic journey requires. Crowley understood that the adept needed to undergo a symbolic ego death to be reborn into a higher state of consciousness. This manifests itself in rituals that may involve breaking social and moral taboos. Within a controlled context and with a clear purpose, it's crucial to note. Exploring altered states of consciousness and confronting one's own flaws and limitations in a brutally honest way. The fundamental difference lies in the intention. It's not the pursuit of transgression for its own sake, but the strategic use of dark energies as tools for the deconstruction and reconstruction of the self, in alignment with the true will. Think of it as a surgeon who needs to cut away diseased tissue to save the patient. The cut is painful and dangerous, but essential for healing. Similarly, the practices associated with the Qliphoth, from a Crowleyan perspective, are instruments for dissecting the psyche, removing what impedes spiritual growth and the full manifestation of individual potential. This approach differs from systems that prioritize enlightenment solely through contemplation and the denial of the mundane. Crowley argued that complete enlightenment requires the immersion in and transmutation of all cosmic energies, including those that inhabit the darkest realms. Furthermore, the intricate relationship between alchemy and Qliphothic exploration, as guided by Crowley, reveals a deeper layer of practical application that transcends the mere manipulation of psychic energies. Crowley envisioned the great work not simply as a process of spiritual enlightenment, but as a complete integration of all facets of existence, including the manipulation and transmutation of matter in a literal alchemical sense. In this context, the Qliphoth would be not only a map to the depths of the soul, but also a guide for understanding and working with the energetic shells that compose the very fabric of material reality. Alchemy, with its well-defined stages of nigredo, blackening decomposition, albedo, whitening purification, and rubedo, reddening completion, finds a direct parallel in the challenges and transformations that the Qliphothic journey imposes. The adept who ventures into the Qliphoth, for example, into the sphere of Shebla, associated with Tifareth, but in its distorted form of cruelty and fanaticism, can not only confront fanaticism in their own psyche, but also learn to dismantle the rigid belief structures that impede evolution, both within themselves and, metaphorically, within matter itself. Crowley believed that cosmic energy, the driving force of the universe, manifested in varying degrees of purity and impurity, and that the Qliphoth represented the rawest and least harmonized aspects of this energy. Understanding and working with these impurities would be crucial for alchemical transmutation, both on the spiritual and material planes. A concrete example would be the idea that Qliphothic energies could be extracted or condensed from specific material or astral forms to then be transmuted into substances of greater power or purity. This doesn't refer to making gold from lead in the most mundane sense, but to a process of spiritual and material refinement that raises the vibration of a substance or an individual. Think of the Qliphoth as a map of where the most challenging and reactive raw materials for transmutation lie in the cosmos and the psyche. By understanding these regions, the adept can learn to collect and work with these energies in a controlled manner, using specific rituals and alchemical techniques to deconstruct and reconstruct, rather than simply observe. The emphasis here is on actively interacting with the Qliphoth forces, using them as catalysts for a process of radical refinement. This differs from systems that view the Qliphoth merely as obstacles to be overcome or energies to be avoided. For Crowley, they were essential components of the great work, powerful tools in the hands of the prepared adept. He encouraged an approach that integrated the exploration of the abyss with alchemical practice, suggesting that mastery over the dark energies was an indispensable step toward obtaining the Philosopher's Stone, both on the inner and outer planes. The profound interconnection between Qliphotic practices and the sphere of demonology, as reinterpreted by Crowley, compels us to an even more granular analysis of the mechanisms by which these energies operate and how they can be consciously invoked and transmuted. Far from being a mere catalogue of infernal beings to be feared, demonology, through the Crowleyan lens, becomes the study of the primordial forces of chaos and disintegration, entities that personify unmanifested or perverted aspects of cosmic potential. Rather than focusing on mere invocation, Crowley was interested in the understanding and integration of these forces. For example, the figure of Belial, often associated with the Qliphoth of Golob, was not seen by him as a demon to be enslaved, but as the personification of disbelief, anarchy, and the absence of divine law. Traversing this sphere would, then, imply confronting the very concept of order and disorder, of authority and revolt at a fundamental level. Crowley could propose rituals that involved the negation of all forms of external and internal authority to, through this controlled anarchy, reveal the individual's true authority, their true will. This is not an invitation to blind disobedience, but to a profound reflection on the nature of law and freedom. Similarly, when addressing the Qliphoth Unveiled, which opposes Qliphoth, the crown, the primordial source, associated with the twin demons, Satan and Lucifer, Crowley did not see a purely destructive force, but rather the representation of the duality inherent in creation itself, the tension between being and non-being, light and shadow that drives manifestation. Rituals linked to Thaumiel could involve the conjuration of these two opposing energies, and, through their ritualistic dance, their fusion into a new form of power or consciousness. This approach contrasts sharply with traditional demonological practices, which often aim to banish or destroy these entities. Crowley, on the other hand, sought the domestication and transmutation of these chaotic forces. He understood these creatures to be manifestations of raw cosmic energies, and that the adept's purpose was not to combat them, but to understand them and utilize them as fuel for their own spiritual evolution. Think of a race car driver who doesn't avoid the dangerous curves of a track, but learns to master the exact speed and angle to chart the fastest line. Qliphothic energies are the dangerous curves of the cosmos and the psyche. Demonology, in its Crowleyan sense, is the art of mastering them. This perspective offers a glimpse into the complexity behind Crowley's reputation as a black magician. In reality, his black magic was actually a radical, non-moralistic exploration of all available energies in the universe, including those that conventional society considers taboo or dangerous. The ultimate goal was always the expansion of consciousness and the manifestation of true will, even if this meant descending into the darkest realms to extract the necessary knowledge and power. Demonology, in this light, becomes a tool for self-discovery, a guide to the primordial foundations of existence that, when understood, free us from the fears and limitations imposed by ignorance. Traversing the dark paths of the Qliphoth under Crowley's enigmatic tutelage reveals an additional aspect of its application: the manipulation of the occult laws governing manifestation, a concept intrinsically linked to alchemy and demonology that is radically distinct from the merely psychological or spiritual. If we previously explored how these spheres represent internal archetypes and primordial energies, we must now consider their role as a map of operations in the very fabric of reality, a compendium of codes that, when deciphered and applied ritually, can influence events and transmute states of being in tangible ways. Crowley was not content with mere introspection. His great work required the active manifestation of his will in the outer world, and the Qliphoth, in his view, provided the power diagrams for such an endeavor. Consider, for example, the Qliphoth of Thagirion, which opposes Hod, the sphere of intellectual glory and communication. Rather than simply confronting intellectual arrogance, a Crowleyan adept could use the principles associated with Thagirion to dismantle flawed systems of thought or introduce disruptive ideas that subvert the established order. This is not mere propaganda, but an alchemical application of language and concept, where words and symbols are charged with an intrinsic psychic force capable of reshaping collective perception and, consequently, reality. Consider how certain political or religious ideas, when imbued with collective fervor and powerful narrative, can alter the course of history. Crowley sought to understand and, more crucially, direct this force. Demonology, in this context, does not invoke demons to serve, but to understand the underlying principles of disorder and revolt, and to channel these energies to break limiting paradigms. Another crucial point is the Qliphoth of Golab, opposite Geburah, the sphere of strength and severity. While Geburah represents the disciplined and constructive force, Golab embodies the destructive and chaotic force. Crowley might have interpreted this as the energy needed to dismantle obsolete and corrupt structures, whether on a personal, social, or cosmic level. A ritual associated with Golab, therefore, would not be a celebration of destruction per se, but an alchemical operation focused on harnessing the entropic force to pave the way for new manifestations. Think of nature, the fire that destroys the ancient forest to allow the growth of new life. This energy of creative deconstruction is what Crowley sought to understand and apply. Thus, the Qliphoth becomes a map of universal forces, including those we call demonic, that can be mobilized and transmuted, not for merely selfish ends, but for the expansion of consciousness and the manifestation of the true will, a force that, for Crowley, transcended conventional good and evil and aimed at the full realization of the individual's potential in harmony with the cosmos. Beyond its direct application in the manipulation of cosmic laws and the transmutation of substances, Crowley's understanding of the Qliphoth offers a unique lens for unraveling the psychological mechanisms of large-scale influence and persuasion, as well as the very structure of secret societies and the development of power rituals. Crowley's exploration of the 11 shadowy spheres did not limit himself to an abstract study. He aimed to deconstruct the very foundations of human perception in order to, from this unveiled foundation, rebuild or direct individual and collective will. The way in which qliphothic energies interact with the psyche, for example, can be observed in the way myths and ideologies gain traction and power among the masses. Consider, for example, the Qliphoth of Nehema, associated with the principle of seduction and uncontrolled lust, which contrasts with Yesod, the foundation of the unconscious and the imagination. Rather than a simple sexual transgression, Crowley interpreted it as the primordial force that attracts and imprisons consciousness in desires and illusions, shaping cultural narratives and even the rise of cults or movements that exploit human weaknesses and yearnings. The application of this knowledge is not limited to an individual level of temptation, but extends to the understanding of how certain discourses or truths can seduce and captivate large numbers of people, diverting them from their mental clarity and directing their energy towards specific ends, often to the detriment of their own development. Furthermore, the very structure of secret societies, many of which Crowley studied, and in some of which he actively participated, reflects the qliphotic principles of shadowy hierarchy and staged initiation. Progression within such orders often mirrors the traversal of the qliphotic spheres, where each level of knowledge and power gained reveals new layers of mystery and responsibility. Obtaining higher degrees in a secret order, for example, can be equated with entering a deeper qliphoth, where the initiate is confronted with more disturbing truths and more potent energies. Crowley understood that the effectiveness of these societies resided not only in shared secrets, but in the manipulation of the psychological laws of influence and power that are, in essence, the Qliphoth principles in action. When unveiling the rituals of power, he not only described their steps, but also analyzed their effectiveness in awakening or activating certain energies within the participants, thus shaping their perception of reality and their ability to act upon it. Ritual development, from this perspective, is the orchestration of psychological, symbolic, and energetic elements to achieve a specific objective. The Qliphoth provide the script for this orchestration, indicating the points of greatest vulnerability and potential influence in the human psyche and the energetic structures of the cosmos. By understanding, for example, the dynamics of revolt and disorder represented by Harab Serapel, as opposed to Netzach, the sphere of victory and energy, an adept could plan actions that would destabilize oppressive systems, not through brute violence, but through a subtle and strategic application of the laws of entropy and disintegration. The intricate application of Qliphothic principles in power rituals and the founding of secret societies, as elucidated by Crowley, extends to the very engineering of mass influence and the manipulation of social perception. Rather than simply a map of shadowy archetypes, the Qliphoth offers a compendium of psychological and energetic mechanisms that, when masterfully applied, can shape beliefs, divert wills, and orchestrate social change on an unprecedented scale. Consider the dynamics of the Qlipha of Gag Shebla, which stands in contrast to Tifareth, the sphere of beauty, harmony, and the sun, personifying in its dark face cruelty, fanaticism, and dogmatic rigidity. Crowley did not see Gag Shebla merely as an archetype of suffering. He understood it as the energy that, when uncontrolled, generates blind adherence to destructive ideologies and the suppression of individuality in the name of an illusory, greater good. In secret societies, mastery of this energy can manifest itself in the creation of cults or fraternities where blind devotion to a leader or doctrine becomes the driving force, supplanting critical thinking and individual autonomy. Influence then becomes a system of mental and energetic control, where initiation rituals and group maintenance function as reinforcement mechanisms, using specific symbolism and depersonalization practices to solidify loyalty and submission. The very structure of leveled initiation, so common in these orders, mirrors progression through the Qliphotic spheres. Each new degree achieved is not merely the acquisition of knowledge, but the submission to a test and the integration of new energies, often associated with a deeper Qlipha. Crowley, in studying these hierarchies, saw not a mere progression of status, but the ability to operate at increasingly subtle and potent levels of influence. The Qlipha of Tagaririm, which opposes Netzach, the sphere of victory and energy, can be interpreted as stagnation, apathy, and lack of purpose, which paradoxically can be used to subjugate or demotivate. In a context of social influence, this translates into the creation of collective despair, the spread of cynicism, or the promotion of passive conformity, thus undermining the capacity for resistance and action. The rituals associated with these spheres may involve inducing states of psychic or emotional exhaustion in order to make individuals more receptive to suggestion and manipulation. The key, for Crowley, was not to fear these energies, but to understand their mechanisms of operation, and ultimately to use them to advance one's own true will, whether individual or that of a group he led. Demonology, in this context, is not about invoking demons for control, but about understanding the psychology behind what we conventionally call demonic influence, the seduction of illusory power, the seduction of purposeless revolt, The seduction of complacency. By unlocking the secrets of the Qliphoth, Crowley shows us how these psychic shadows can be actively employed to reshape reality, creating societies and influencing minds in ways that defy external comprehension, all orchestrated by a calculated application of the occult laws that govern both the microcosm and the macrocosm. As we weave together the conceptual threads we have uncovered, we realize that the journey through the Qliphoth, as outlined through Crowley's lens, transcends the mere cataloging of shadowy forces. It reveals itself as an intricate map of the very architecture of existence, a compendium of operating principles that shape reality at its most fundamental levels. This is not a passive exploration, but an active engagement with the energies that permeate the cosmos and the psyche, an invitation to the alchemy of the soul, and ultimately, of matter itself. Energies that once seemed merely symbolic or archetypal now present themselves as dynamic threads, weaving the tapestry of our perceptions, our societies, and our evolutionary potential. It is like observing a vast and complex mechanism of interlocking gears, where understanding the movement of one piece reveals the strength and direction of all the others. The way Crowley's ideas guide us to dismantle illusions, confront our own inner demons, and harness these energies to manifest our true will converges toward a culmination of profound self-transformation. The influence of these forces, previously veiled, now manifests as an invitation to act in harmony with the deepest laws of existence, even those that reside in the depths of what we consider the abyss. Reflecting on this journey to this point, the landscape of occult knowledge expands, revealing not only the mysteries of the external universe, but the vast and unexplored geography of the inner being. The ritual complexities, the intricate symbolic correspondences, and the manipulation of the very laws that govern manifestation all converge toward a deeper understanding of the power latent within each individual. The apparent darkness of the Qliphoth, demystified by Crowley's vision, is not an end in itself, but a gateway to a more comprehensive understanding of wholeness. The way power structures, both social and psychic, operate and are influenced by the principles we explore, invites us to look at the world with new eyes, perceiving the hidden currents that move events and shape perceptions. Thus, as we approach the conclusion of this exploration, we are compelled to consider the ultimate impact of this understanding, how it equips us not only to navigate the world, but to co-create it, armed with the unveiled knowledge of the shadows. At this threshold, the understanding that solidifies is that the map of the Qliphoth, more than a representation of dangers, is a guide to self-mastery and the manifestation of one's highest potential, a path that, though paved with the challenges of darkness, invariably leads to the light of true self-understanding and union with the divine. The energies that once frightened us now present themselves as tools, as essential aspects of wholeness that must be integrated for the great work to be fully accomplished. As we consider the weight of these revelations, we realize that Crowley's legacy challenges us to transcend our fears and limitations, to embrace the complexity of existence, and to seek truth in all its forms, even those that reside in the darkest and most forgotten corners of reality. The convergence of all the elements discussed, from the human psyche to cosmological laws, points to a conclusion that resonates with the promise of transformation and the unveiling of the power intrinsic to each of us, inviting a final look at what it truly means to unravel the map of the tree of death. Thus, in unraveling the intricate labyrinth of the Qliphoth, we find not a mere bestiarity of horrors, but a cosmic mirror reflecting the depths of our own existence and the universe around us. Aleister Crowley's work, in this sense, does not offer us a safe haven in a promised paradise, but a courageous invitation to enter the very core of reality, where light and shadow intertwine in a primordial dance. The distinction between the luminous spheres of the Tree of Life and the dark counterparts of the Qliphoth does not reside in a simplistic moral dichotomy of good versus evil, but in a profound understanding of wholeness. The shells emanating from the divine force, the energies that, in their raw essence, defy order and harmonious manifestation, reveal themselves through Crowley's lens as the necessary catalysts for the true alchemy of soul and spirit. The journey through these realms is not an invitation to depravity, but to radical integration, to dismantling the illusions that imprison us, and to discovering the power inherent in our true will. Each Qliphothic challenge is, in essence, an invitation to confront and transmute our own limitations, transforming what would be an obstacle into a stepping stone to ascension. The practical application of this knowledge, which ranges from the manipulation of occult laws to the engineering of mass influence, forces us to reconsider the nature of power and perception. The rituals, symbols, and primordial energies described in the Tree of Death map are not mere esoteric adornments, but tools of transformation that, in the hands of the prepared adept, can reshape reality at its most fundamental levels. This wisdom challenges us to look beyond appearances, to uncover the hidden currents that move events and shape collective perceptions. Crowley's audacity lies in showing us that true mastery is not found in denial or escape from darkness, but in the courage to enter it, understand it, and ultimately transmute it. Demonology, in this context, ceases to be a battlefield against external forces and becomes a profound study of the very foundations of chaos and disorder. Energies that, once understood and integrated, unleash unlimited potential for creation and manifestation. The key is not to fear the abyss, but to learn to dance with its primordial forces, using them as fuel for the expansion of consciousness and the realization of one's inner divinity. Therefore, as we close this chapter, the understanding that resonates is that the true path lies not in evasion, but in conscious immersion. The Qliphoth, with its map of shadow spheres, teaches us that the totality of existence is a spectrum, and that embracing both poles, light and shadow, is the secret to transcending self-imposed limitations. Crowley's legacy is not a prescription, but an invitation to audacity, exploration, and the constant reinvention of self. True practice begins now, with the courage to look within and without, unraveling the veils of illusion and embracing the vastness of our own potential, recognizing that the deepest journey begins where conventional paths end, at the border where light and shadow meet and transform.